just about a week ago it was released, and the polling was actually just done a couple of weeks ago. It was a sample of 10,000 homes. If you know anything about polling, 10,000 homes in a country of 6 million people is a huge sample. That is a huge statistical sample, and this was in-home interviews. And it was very scientific, urban and rural, and just very well done. And one of the questions asked was just a simple question: do you feel that you're living in hope and confidence for the future, or are you feeling pessimistic and discouraged, or are you either one of those? And 76.7% of the people said that they're living in hope and confidence for the future. We were also asked, do you approve of the president's performance? Do you disapprove of the president's performance, or are you just so-so about it? 80% of the people said they approve. There's an 80% approval rating. 7.7% said they disapproved of the president's performance. And you could feel, I kind of jumped the gun because we'll go through the electoral process stuff, but we could feel the confidence. In 3.5 years, people that I know there, they just looked different. They were standing up straighter. They felt confident. They felt proud. You could just feel it. It was infectious. I loved being there. Abra didn't want to leave. This is a family that I've known in Nicaragua since 1988. Not all these people were alive in 1988. This is the matriarch. She's a long-time widow, so she raised her kids. She's an older woman, so just think about her life. She was born during the dictatorship. She got married during the dictatorship. She had all of her kids during the dictatorship. Most of them were mostly grown up, at least mostly during the dictatorship. Then 1979, the revolution. A little bit of hope for a year and a half or whatever. And then the Contra War. And I know you all probably knew about the Contra War. Terrible, devastating war. The country was, I think of it back then as more like a country of 3 million. 500,000 people migrated to the city. A farmer couldn't work his field without being afraid somebody would walk out of the woods and shoot him in the head. It was terrible, devastated the economy. It was just a horrible, brutal, terrible war. Then she lived through that war. Then the Sandinistas lost the election. Then 16 years of corrupt thieves in government who sold off all the public property to benefit their rich pals, charged money to go to school, did away with free public health care, infrastructure deteriorated, people went from poverty to extreme poverty. She's lived through all of that. This woman, I've never really known her really closely. I go visit the family, but she's like quiet. She welcomes me into her house, but we don't talk. She didn't say very much. I talk mostly to the oldest son of the family. And I said, it was 3.5 years before this, 4 years ago now, I said to him, now that Daniel Ortega is back in power after his first re-election 5 years ago, he'd been back in power a little over a year, I said, so are things better? And he said, things are a little bit better. This time I said, 3.5 years ago, I asked you if things were better. You said a little bit better. How are things now? He said, a lot better. And his mom started talking with this big smile on her face, and she wouldn't stop. She said, the roads are better, schools are better, food is available at reasonable prices, crime's down in the neighborhood, the buses are better, blah, 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 with this big smile. This is a woman that never said a word before, and I thought that was very typical. Yes?
I think the whole world pretty well knows that our support of the Contras was very wrong and illegal. And I know that President Clinton apologized to Guatemala for the mistakes we made there. And Clinton Paul went to Chile to apologize for our mistakes there. I'm wondering if our country has ever apologized to Nicaragua or any plans plans to do that?
I've never heard of any such thing, and the difference is that the United States is never going to apologize to a Sandinista government, that's for sure.
No,
I mean, we're working actively. We still, in different ways, are working actively against them. Like in this election, the U.S. supported the opposition, funneled millions of dollars to the opposition, etc. So as far as I know, there's never been an apology. And besides that, the International Court ruled that the mining of Nicaragua's harbors and the cultural war stuff was illegal, and that the U.S. owes Nicaragua reparations. And of course, nothing's ever been paid. Just like we haven't paid Vietnam reparations that they're due for the damage we've done there. So I have never heard of any such apology.
but are you suggesting that Daniel Ortega, by the way, would President Ortega today be the same President Ortega that he was back in the 80s?
You mean him personally, or is it a different guy?
Politically.
Yeah, well, among progressives in the left of the United States, there's been a total misconception that Daniel changed over the years and was no longer really a revolutionary, was no longer really a man of the people, and that there was no truth to that whatsoever. No truth to that whatsoever. It's amazing. That's partly why I give these talks, is to try to sort people out on this. No, he's never changed. I mean, I saw him speak in the 80s and the 90s. I've always had total confidence in the guy. Now his brother who was head of the army after the 1990 elections, pretty much bolted, ended up in Costa Rica, and what I hear, what my Nicaraguan friends say, he lives in Nicaragua as a rich man. But Alfredo, our friend who lived with an Escalade, said he and Daniel are enemies. I don't know exactly if that's true, but he was a major figure in the revolution. Now he's, what I hear, living like a rich man in Costa Rica. He opposed Daniel's re-election 5 years ago, is what I've heard. And there are, you obviously have some political knowledge, and I don't want to bore you, but I go into too much detail. But here's the story. And to me, this is a story that's like fascinating and endlessly interesting to me. Okay, they lost the election in 1990, huge, well, unexpectedly. I mean, everybody, including the United States government and including the whole world, thought they were going to win. If all the polls said they were going to win. I now think, in retrospect, it might have been a good thing they lost, because Ronald Reagan did have a plan to invade. Now, whether he would have carried it through, I don't know. And I talked to my Nicaraguan friends and I said, it would have been terrible. I mean, it would have been horrible. And they say, we would have gone to the mountains, we would have fought him. And I'm sure they would have, but it would have been terrible. But what happened after that a huge blow, unexpected blow, well, it split apart. Most of the Sandinistas that were in the legislature at the time ended up, eventually, after 2 years or so, split off from the Sandinista party, formed a separate party called the Sandinista Renovation Movement, which many people in the left of the United States think, oh, they're the real revolutionaries. Not even close. It turns out these were the opportunists. These were the egotistical people. These were the people who thought they should be running the party. But the people, the Sandinista mainstream people, have always been with Daniel. Always been with Daniel. And let me tell you something about the history of Daniel. You know that little town I told you that I've been going to since 1988, 60 clicks out in the mountains? He lives just about 12, he was born 12 kilometers closer towards the highway from that, in a town called La Libertad. Coincidentally, the present vice president was also born in the town, and Cardinal Obando Ibravo, who is the other important male figure in the country, was also born in that same little town. Conservative area. His mother was arrested on the charge that her love letters were actually encoded revolutionary communications. I don't know the details of that. But Daniel was first arrested as a teenager. He was arrested by the dictator as a teenager. He was eventually severely tortured. He was in prison for years. He was in exile for years. And here's a man who has never given up. He's never given up. He's always been with the people. After he lost the election in 1990, he just went back to work. His party split. He stayed with the people. Thomas Borge, the founder of the Sandinista Party, the one who died about 2 months ago, stayed loyal to Daniel. The famous priest Miguel Discoto, who 2 years ago was the head of the UN General Assembly from Nicaragua, stayed loyal to Daniel. Some people didn't. The very famous poet and priest Ernesto Cardenal, he's a traitor. I saw him on TV campaigning with the right-wing candidate, somebody we used to think of as a hero. I dined with the Nicaraguan ambassador in the late 80s. Sat right beside him when we talked. He now takes money from the U.S. and runs an organization funded by USAID. So what I'm trying to say is there was a serious split. But now I look at that and I think that was fortunate too, because all the jerks were called out of there. And I said to Alfredo, I said, how could this be? I'm watching Ernesto Cardenal standing beside this right-wing candidate who was in Honduras where the Congress taking millions of dollars from the United States. I said, how could he be? How could this be? And he said, ego, jealousy, opportunism. These people think they should be running the country. But what do the people say? The people say, Daniel. Daniel was elected with less than 39% of the vote in a three-man race. As we'll show you the election later. Re-elected 6 months ago with 62.5% of the vote. And everywhere in the country, when people said, I vote for the president because of all the wonderful things he's done for the people. And that's what, there are only 2 newspapers in the country, and you read these news, it's like Fox News. It's garbage, total garbage. It's only 2 newspapers. Now, TV stations, there are right-wing ones and there are pro-government ones. Radio stations, there are right-wing ones and pro-government. But over the last 5 years, people have seen who's really with the people. Daniel. He's a tireless worker. He's amazing. I personally believe he's a political genius. When we left the country 4 years ago, 3.5 years before this visit, I was glad he was in power. I saw some little changes. Healthcare was now free, but crummy. And I remember driving out of the country and just thinking, how are they bitterly poor? After Haiti, the poorest country in the hemisphere. 20% of the people in extreme poverty. We're talking about no shoes. How is he going to turn this? How is he, with the U.S. being his enemy still, how is he going to turn this around? And that is an amazing story. And anyway.
I got to go. I got to go to Parker Scout Camp.
Oh, okay.
But
sorry you're not going to hear the end of the story, but if you ever want to talk again.
Who was that guy that caused that problem over in the east and sent the money down to the country center?
Say that again?
There was an army man who sold weapons to Israel.
Oh, Oliver North?
Huh?
Oliver North?
Oliver North, oh yeah. He gets a big pension today. That's interesting how he crapped on our government.
Yeah. Well, he's still a right-wing broadcaster.
Yeah, excuse me, goodbye.
Yeah.
No, take care.
Oh, if you ever want to talk again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Thursday I'll be meeting with Father Ted Niehaus. He's been there for 45 years.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah, he's been through this whole war.
Now, where is he?
Well, he's in the east. There's San Pedro del Norte and Bluefields, Siona.
And where are you meeting with him?
Pardon?
You said you're meeting with him?
Yeah. Well, I led about 9 reverse mission groups down there. So, yeah.
But where are you meeting with him?
Over at Maple Lake, close to Annandale.
Cool.
I gotta go. See you.
All right, take care. Thanks for coming. So anyway, this room was kind of emblematic of many people we met, of how positive they felt about how things were going. And although I knew I was going to see good things because I was studying the situation, I was surprised. And we met with a journalist who was originally from Uruguay. He was in Nicaragua in the 80s. After we lost election stuff, he ended up living in Sweden. He came back a few years when we met him. He said it's amazing what they've done in a couple of years. I mean, it's amazing. I'm still trying to figure out how they've done so much. Anyway, so the older son then took us up to this. Why don't you tell about this?
There's a park in Managua that's up on a hill. The park is called La Loma de Tizcapa. And there's this permanent historical exhibition here, kind of a museum called Noches de Tortura, which means Nights of Torture. This building here is where the dictator Somoza had a jail, and many people were tortured here. There's a picture of Somoza, and he was also a fan of big cats. And here he is with one of his cats. And my understanding is that often the detained persons and the cats were kept together, which didn't always go too well for the people. But he's well known for that. Here's Rigoberto Lopez Perez. We mentioned him earlier as the man who finally assassinated Papa Somoza. And here's a famous quote from him, which means, "The flowers of my days will forever be wilted as long as the blood of the tyrant remains in his veins." So this was a man who was very convicted, and he did kill Somoza and was immediately killed himself, as I'm sure he knew he would be. That top es preferible hacerme morir como rebelde y no vivir como esclavo, is it's preferable to have myself die as a rebel and not live as a slave. These are pictures from the U.S. Marine occupation, and on the left there is a very, very famous photograph of a U.S. Marine holding in his hand the severed head of a Nicaraguan. And here's again Sandino, Augusto Sandino, and the quote says, "We will go forward until we reach the sunshine of liberty or until death. If we die, our cause will continue living, others will follow us." So from there, we went to...
Literally, we went from the torture chamber to the amusement park.
To the amusement, straight to the amusement park. Because we had heard some talk about this place called El Parque de Niñez Feliz, the Park of the Happy Childhood, in Managua. And it's an amusement park that the government set up, and it's free. Was open during the time period that we were there, and for several months around that time, it was open from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day. And it's free for anyone from Managua, children, adults, people from the surrounding countryside, anywhere in the country, anywhere out of country, because we asked if we would be able to go and get in. And yeah, of course. And you just lines were long, but that's what happens when you have a free amusement park. So here, and this is again part of the government's push for people to not only be productive and educated and healthy, but also to enjoy themselves. So there's a lot of pushing for like sports facilities and all that. Like you mentioned, they were going to build 2 soccer fields in the new housing in the dump in Managua. And there's a lot of that going on. And there's also this. And so a lot of these people, of course, they would never be able to afford to go to an amusement park like this, but here they can. And the park at this point, it's only open on like holiday weekends and such. But I suppose that should they have the funding in the future, they'd like to make it open more often.
One morning early, we were south of Managua. I got up, and a Nicaraguan friend and I took a hike down to an old volcanic crater that's now a big lake. And we always find these pods. My friend said monkeys eat the seeds, and pretty soon you can see the tail there. There's a howler monkey there. There it is, screaming at me. That's the female. She doesn't say anything, but and this is way way up there. My friend, I never saw him, he said that there were young monkeys back in the trees, so he was defending his family. And there you can see the lake down there in the distance. Just to show you it's a beautiful country, lovely place, it's a protected area, and that's what you find when you get to the bottom.
So, as I mentioned, we visited several volcanoes while we were there. The last one was extinct. This one, Volcan Masaya, is definitely not extinct. It's one of the largest sources of natural pollution in the world. You can see in the right of that picture the haze rising out of the crater there. And did they recently have an eruption?
Yeah, about a month, maybe 6 weeks ago, minor. They actually had to come up, they closed the park down to National Park, they had to come up and put out a fire. There were minor earthquakes going around, they were spitting stuff out. They brought some specialists from Scandinavia over to measure what gases were coming out, because that could be indicative of what's going on. I haven't heard if it's still shut down. And then there's a couple other close by volcanoes that were also doing stuff that didn't turn up to be a major eruption. But my wife and I were here in '88, and then when the kids and I went 4 years ago, there had been an eruption in the interim. There was a lava flow, a new lava field down there. You can see that it's this side over here where the lava had flowed down. You can see the vehicles are parked back. You're required to park your vehicle backwards in case you need to get out of there quickly. But it's a pretty cool place. They actually have a very good museum there about volcanism. 4 years ago, the kids and I, a young man, guided us over this hill down to where there were caves, lava tube caves. We went back in this bat-infested cave and came in where it was caved in. It was a place where the indigenous people had sacrificed maidens to the hag goddess of the volcano. This volcano is dangerous.
Right, and if you breathe too deeply while the winds come in your direction, it's hard on the lungs.
You probably wouldn't want to visit this.
No, it can be hard to breathe. But there is a species of parrot which the fumes don't bother it, which is a little unusual, and so they actually nest on the walls, the cliffs inside the mound of the volcano. And the fumes are a pretty good deterrent for most predators, but it doesn't bother them. So that's where they live. It's interesting.
So then we traveled up the west coast with our destination being Leon, where we went past Leon, went up and went to the beach out of the Pacific. There's just a kind of a wild coast area there. Went to Leon. There's girls coming out of the surf to visit this woman. She has a shirt that says CSE. That's the Supreme Electoral Council. She was hired to train people who were going to work in and the polls and be observers at the polling places. So I interviewed her about the electoral laws and the process and how it would be working. Because after this, we were going back to Escalade to be there during the election. Little did I know that when we got back to Escalade, one of the people living in the house was actually running a polling place, so he knew everything. He could have told me, and he had all the stacks of information. So, but it was very good to get her, and we asked about the credibility of the processes. And she said, no process is, foolproof. But she said it's very, very good. She said any problems are they learn about soap, hair in the soup. In other words, very slight. And we then went back to Esteli for the election. But we're going to finish up the trip and then tell you about the election. This is out in that town that I told you I formed a sister city relationship with years ago. This is the house I've stayed in over the years, and that's Abra's actually built over a small river. This is a bridge here. There's Abra out, a typical place out there. This is the shops are better stocked than I've ever seen them. And we were, like I say, 60 kilometers off the highway, and the road was just the last section was being paved, and it's paved now. for the first time. It used to be when I go up, it's like, are you going to make it or not? And now it's
That's
like,
the road that we punctured our oil pan on, and now that
it's a pleasant drive in the country now. This is the Ministry of Health, the Center of Health. It's on the name of this little town out in the sticks. Now, when I used to go there in '88 and '90, there was one doctor. It was during the Contra War. That was dangerous out there. It says in this unit, detention to persons is totally free, and there are 6 or 8 doctors working out here now. Many of them go out into the countryside, and everything is totally free. There's a couple of kids waiting to see the doctor and nurse. The head doctor was in the department capital at a meeting. This was the head nurse, real nice guy. He gave me a pamphlet about, what was that over here, about leptospirosis? The other table, campaigns they have against various diseases. There was an outbreak of leptospirosis because of the rains a few years. If it rains like heck, the rodents come into the buildings and they transmit this disease through their urine and water. So if you wade barefoot through the rat urine, you can get this disease. They got campaigns against every disease, and he just said, yeah, do whatever you want, take a look at the place. Which was really, I don't even know what it is, but virtually everywhere I went, they probably would say, yeah, come on in, take a look, do whatever you want.
You go to an elementary school and the teachers are like, yeah, of course, come into the classroom, see.
I bother every class, every teacher.
They were very, very open and telling you how things worked and letting you see, and just very, very helpful.
Here's one of the staff nurses. The medical people I met were like very proud. Here they've got a system that's working now. It's free for everybody. Their health stats are improving wonderfully, and people are proud of what they're doing. It's a young woman from the town, was educated in nursing at the departmental capital. There's a university there. You'll see a sign on the wall here. It says 2011 Year of Unity for the Common Good. That was the slogan for 2011. Year of Unity for the Common Good. Here's a baby, had a little sniffle. As we came to the country, there had been a little outbreak of H1N1 influenza. In places where there were outbreaks, actually youth volunteers went door to door saying, if anybody's got any symptoms, they'll get you down to the clinic, get this taken care of. The mom just wanted to make sure the baby was all right. Previously, this woman probably would have never gone to the doctor, probably never any money whatsoever. It's just people getting their blood pressure taken. One of the young doctors, he'll do a couple of years out in the countryside, then go back. It's from the suburbs of Nicaragua. All these medical people were adamant that people were healthy, things were better, things were going very well. Here's a very friendly pharmacist. Back in '88, '90, when I'd go down, I was living in Tucson, Arizona, I'd go to doctors and clinics, and I'd get expired meds, samples, and stuff, and take them down. She said she now has everything that she needs. The women just come, hand their prescription in the window, she hands them out. Not a quarter of it changes hands. Money is not involved in the medical system. She was very proud. She said, I know this is inhalers for asthmatics, all free. Very proud of her work, very proud of her, the fact that they have everything they need. In the last year, in 2011, Nicaragua got 2 awards from the UN for healthcare. One was for reducing child and maternal death, largely because of these casa maternas, where women can go for the prenatal care to deliver their baby and for their postnatal care. They're building these all over the country. It's another view encouraging breastfeeding. In fact, the legislature just declared, I think, a certain week in July is breastfeeding week, and they're encouraging the fathers to get involved in raising their children, having strong family units. This is out of Corn Island in the Caribbean. This is the health unit there. It says, to vaccinate me is in your hands, protect me from pneumonia and meningitis from pneumococcus. Nicaragua was perhaps the first poor country in the world to offer this vaccine for pneumococcus, expensive vaccine. It says, take your child 2 months of age to be vaccinated at the nearest unit of health. Exemplary vaccination program, 97% of kids are vaccinated. People come from around the world to study their system, how they do it. They'll have a campaign over maybe a week's length where they'll vaccinate 1 million people. Really quite extraordinary. Elementary school here, this is actually preschoolers, and they're counting to 20 for me. Teachers nervously waiting to see if they'd be able to do it, and they were fantastic. This is Abra, and I met with these 4 elementary teachers, had a conference with them. Every teacher I met anywhere in the country, and met the librarian in Sandino's hometown, they all said, without a doubt, these children's lives are going to be better because of education. Not that their goals right now are so high by our standards. Right now, I met with a woman from the Department of the Ministry of Education, has to lead an educational planner, and she said right now they're fighting the battle for the 6th grade, trying to get everyone to complete the 6th grade, and old people even who never went to school to come back and get educated up to the 6th grade. The UN has declared Nicaragua illiteracy free. Now there still are a couple of % of people, mostly old people, who are not literate. Their programs are ongoing. They have 3 phases. The first is the Cuban program, Si se puede, yes you can, which teaches people to read. And then there's the second phase that teaches them that it's yes you can read and write. And then they have which gets people up to the 6th grade. And then they have a 3rd phase, which is yes I can continue, where people are introduced to literature and such and so forth. Every teacher said, and then though class sizes can be huge, 40, 50, 60 kids in the class. I went to a private school and I asked the assistant director, I said, well, they had classes of 20, 25. I said, so you're able to give a better education with a small class size and stuff. She said, I'd like to tell you that we're doing a better job. She said, those public school teachers, by the way, were not paid very well at all. She said they are dedicated and they're doing a great job. Those kids are getting an education equivalent to what we're doing. These are some of those dedicated ladies right there. And the kids in Nicaragua are fantastic, which is great. They do have a problem with some boys not going to school. Some of these classes will say, hey, where are all the boys? This is a rural area, cow raising country. The dad wants them out engaged in economic activity. But these kids are really fantastic. And all these classrooms have those signs saying, 2011, Year of Unity for the Common Good. These kids are learning that they're in this together.
You can see that that's almost all girls.
That's almost all girls. Then we headed out, like I said, out to the Atlantic coast. This is the end of the highway. We're on this power ponga. It goes like crazy. Everybody just hunkers down. This is real early in the morning. This is the tropics, but it was cool. And the water was spraying. Everybody just hangs on. And we go about 60 or 70 kilometers in an hour and a half. So that's a pretty fast boat ride. I was just hoping we didn't get a submerged log. And we got out to the city of Bluefields, like I said, English-speaking blacks. We got on this ship right here. And this is more special effects showing you that I have gotten a little seasick. And this is the port out there. I was there in '88, and later that year it was wiped by a massive hurricane. Almost all the trees and buildings here have gone up or grown since 1988. The island was really wet, swept. There's the sea on a good, clear day. This water looks like liquid emeralds. Unbelievably beautiful. This is the town that rained for the days we were out there. This is a kid that lived at the little hotel where we stayed. He brought a bar of soap out, just did clothes and everything right under the rainwater there. It's a crossing sign, which I've never seen before. Abra and her friend wanted to go diving, but the weather was just too bad, so they couldn't get out. But we were able to go snorkeling. We found this snorkeling guide. He's got his knife there. He said, in case we met any sharks. We weren't lucky enough to do that. But we saw a beautiful coral reef and schools of fish, and sea fan, some lobster. There's just some beach. A boat that was swept up in one of the hurricanes. I thought it was cool. It kind of turned into an agave garden there. And this is a boat. You go ahead.
Well, I was going to mention that the people who live on the coast there and out on this island, it's very, very mixed. You know, you have your Mosquito Indians and other indigenous people who speak indigenous languages, and then there's the English-speaking blacks, and there's Spanish-speaking people, and a lot of people, and it all gets very mixed up, and a lot of them speak multiple languages. And so you'd hear people carrying on conversation where one person would be speaking Spanish and the other one would be speaking Mosquito, and then they'd answer in English, or they'd just,
For the kids at this hotel right there, when it was raining, they were playing stickball, and they would just, their sentences would be part one language, so
right,
part
just
another,
it makes
just
it
switch
all
back and
in
forth.
one sentence.
A woman was a little annoyed. She was yelling across the street to her kid who was carrying a satchel or a suitcase, yelling at her like, I think it was in Mosquito, a language I couldn't recognize at all. And she was yelling at her, and the kid just answered and said, there's nothing in there. It just goes from one language to the other. You want to tell about our road trip back?
So on the boat that we took out there, it was, with the waves, it was a little